Did you catch wind of this? The UK government is looking at offloading or maybe even selling, over 50 buildings right in Whitehall?
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty significant.
Okay, let's really get into this because this sounds like, well, way more than just rearranging the furniture,
But oh, it absolutely is. We're looking at quite a fundamental shift, really, in how and where the government operates. Specifically, HMRC's plan to shrink their Whitehall office space by a pretty hefty 25%.
25%, right.
Yeah.
And this deep dive, it isn't just about like the property pages or anything. We've got some really interesting analysis here that digs into the why and the what of this move.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to try and unpack for you today.
Yeah, it's easy to just see it as, managing buildings.
Yeah.
But it actually reflects much broader strategic aims, doesn't it?
It does.
It speaks to their efficiency drives, their commitment to spreading opportunities across the country,
Right.
even environmental targets.
Right. So understanding this gives you, the listener, a real insight into the government's priorities in action.
Precisely. So our aim here is to sort of cut through the noise and pull out the really important bits of this whole initiative. So let's start with a big question. What's actually driving this significant downsizing in central London?
Well, the main driver seems to be this thing called the Smarter Government Strategy.
Smarter government strategy. Okay.
Yeah, you can think of it as their kind of overarching plan to create a more agile, cost-effective, and, importantly, geographically balanced public sector.
Okay, that sounds quite high level. What are the concrete objectives they're hoping to hit with this strategy?
Well, there are several key goals, and they're all kind of linked. First off, improving value for money.
Standard government name, right?
Pretty much.
Uh-huh.
Making sure taxpayer money delivers the max benefit. And tied right into that is cutting the, frankly, substantial costs of maintaining that huge central London property portfolio.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Those prime London spots, they can't be cheap to run. What else is under this smarter government umbrella? They're also really embracing new ways of working. So specifically, a shift towards hybrid models.
Okay, more flexible for staff.
Exactly. Combining office time with remote work. And crucially, tying into those wider national priorities, there's the commitment to support the leveling up agenda.
Ah, leveling up.
Yeah, moving public sector jobs investment out to regions like Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham. Those are the key ones mentioned.
So it's not just about saving money on buildings. It's woven into wider economic and social policy.
Interesting. And who's actually tasked with making this huge change happen on the ground?
The key body is the Government Property Agency, the GPA.
GPA.
They operate under the Cabinet Office. And, their progress and how effective they are, that gets scrutinized by the Public Accounts Committee. So there's oversight.
Right. Okay, so we're seeing the motivation. Now, let's talk money. The analysis we looked at pointed to some pretty, eye-watering potential cost savings. That's definitely a big part of it. The expectation is, by reducing that Whitehall footprint, they're looking at savings exceeding $1.5 billion over the next decade.
$1.5 billion. That's a huge number. The analysis did a quick calculation to show how, didn't it? Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It was a simple example, really. It projected, say, 50 buildings being vacated and estimated an average annual cost of maybe £5 million per building.
Okay.
So that alone adds up to $250 million a year in savings. And if you multiply that by 10 years?
Get to £2.5 billion. Wow. Okay, so the potential scale is massive, even if the final figure is 1.5 billion plus.
Exactly. That was just an illustration of the potential scale.
But where will these savings actually come from?
It's more than just not paying rent, surely.
Oh, absolutely. It's across several areas. Ending those expensive London leases is, a major factor. But also big reductions in just running the places, operating costs, maintenance.
Utilities, cleaning, repairs,
Yeah.
all that stuff. All of that. And plus, with more flexible working, they expect to use the remaining space much more efficiently. Less wasted desk space, basically.
Okay, so we've got the strategy, the money side. What changes will we actually see happening? Like the tangible stuff?
Well, the most obvious thing will be vacating and maybe selling those 50-plus buildings in Whitehall. That's a big physical change to a very visible area.
Definitely.
And at the same time, you're seeing the creation of these new large HMRC regional hubs. Places like Manchester, Leeds, Glasgow, Birmingham.
So that's the leveling up part in action.
Precisely, a concrete example of moving functions out of London.
And what about for the people working there? How does their day-to-day change?
The strategy really leans into remote work and hot desking policies.
Ah, hot desking. Not always popular.
Perhaps not, but it fits the model. Fewer dedicated desks, more investment in tech to support people working from anywhere, and there's also a big push on energy efficiency across the whole government estate.
Right, aiming for that net zero goal.
Exactly. It all ties together.
That analysis we mentioned had a really useful table, kind of breaking it down. Let's dig into some of those specifics, starting with the policy framework behind it all.
Yeah, as we said, it's all guided by the Government Property Strategy 2022-2030. That's the sort of master plan for managing all their property.
And the cost impact. We talked about the 1.5 billion plus, but the table spelled out how they get there.
Yeah, it just reinforces that point. The savings come from, one, rationalizing the estate, getting rid of expensive or underused buildings, and two, lower running costs for what's left.
Makes sense. What about the people, the workforce? How's that transition being handled?
The analysis flagged a pretty big number. Over 20,000 civil service roles are being relocated out of London.
20,000. That's a serious shift.
It is a substantial redistribution of government jobs across the UK.
And to make that work, having people spread out, the tech infrastructure needs to be solid, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical. The table really highlighted the investment needed in cloud-based systems, digital tools, all the things you need for seamless remote working and collaboration when teams aren't in the same building.
Yeah, can't really do hybrid or remote well without that foundation.
No, you can't.
And finally, on the details front, the environmental side. It's not just about the money, is it?
No, definitely not presented that way. A key benefit they're highlighting is cutting CO2 emissions.
How so?
Well, lower energy use in fewer, maybe less intensively used London offices, and also fewer daily commutes into central London as more people work remotely or from regional hubs closer to home.
Right, okay. So this isn't happening in a bubble. What are the sort of ripple effects we might see on industries, on cities?
Well, potentially, you could see commercial property vacancy rates go up in central London. I mean, the government's a huge occupier.
True.
But conversely, you might see a boost in urban planning and development around government offices in those regional hub cities, more demand there.
So more office building or refurbishment in Manchester, Leeds, etc.
Could be. And also, think about the support industries. You'd expect more demand for facilities, management services, cleaning, security, maintenance in the Midlands and the North where these hubs are going.
Interesting knock-on effects.
And then there's the question of those Whitehall buildings themselves, often heritage buildings, prime locations. What happens to them? Big potential for reuse, redevelopment.
Yeah, that really does raise questions about Whitehall's future character. Now, the analysis also tackled some common questions people might have. Let's clarify a couple. First, job losses. Is this about cutting jobs?
The official line is very clear. Jobs are being relocated, not eliminated. People will either move to the regional hubs or work remotely.
Okay, that's an important clarification. Relocation, not reduction. And the environmental impact again.
Yeah, just to reiterate, they see this as directly supporting the net zero target. Less energy use in London offices, fewer commuting miles overall.
Got it. And finally, who's keeping an eye on all this, making sure it works, stays on budget?
So the GPA is leading the charge, as we said, but they're accountable. Bodies like the National Audit Office, the NAO, and the Cabinet Office itself provide oversight.
Okay, good to know there's scrutiny. So let's try and quickly wrap this up. We've looked at HMRC's big plan to cut its Whitehall office space significantly. The main reasons seem to be saving money, boosting the regions through leveling up, and hitting those net zero environmental goals.
Yeah, and the key changes are vacating over 50 buildings, ways of working.
And these changes, as you said, they don't exist in isolation. They could really ripple out and affect property markets, urban development across the UK.
Absolutely. It's a major shift.
It really is. It's not just shuffling offices. It gives you a real window into how government strategy is evolving, how it interacts with different parts of the country.
Yeah.
So here's maybe something to think about. As government work gets more spread out, more distributed, how might that fundamentally reshape the economic, maybe even the social landscape of these different UK regions down the line?
That's a great question. It's a really significant shift, like you say, with potentially quite profound long-term consequences. Definitely something worth keeping an eye on.
For sure.
And, for anyone listening who wants to dig even deeper, the actual UK government estate strategy document is out there, plus analyses from places like the Institute for Government, NAO reports, maybe publications like Public Sector Executive. Lots of resources if you want to explore further.
Excellent point. Plenty to follow up on there.